the books or writers that influenced you in those formative years?
Only one. One philosopher and one writer. As far as writers go, Victor Hugo, whom I discovered at 13, and that was the greatest literary experience I ever had. Incomparable and incommunicable. I admired him enormously. The sense of lives that he communicated, the glamour, the grandeur of men, was so high above anything I had encountered in any other books, and certainly in another universe as compared to the reality of Soviet Russia, that I, to this day, owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Victor Hugo. And it's from him, in effect, that I learned the art of the romantic novel, in the serious sense of the word, the integration of plot, of action, with the theme and the philosophical meaning of a book. I don't agree with his philosophy, but I admire him as a writer tremendously. The other influence is, of course, Aristotle in philosophy, who is the only philosopher with whom I agree, at least in fundamentals, not in everything, but in that which is originally his, not in the Platonic element in him. And that had a great deal of influence on my subsequent thinking, but those are the only two.
Did you begin writing at the age of 9?
I began slightly earlier, at about 8 and a half. I remember the first story I wrote was signed. It was my name and 8 and a half after it. But
was it fiction?
Fiction. It was a movie scenario. I was very impressed with screen, and I started writing screen stories. I attempted my first novel at the age of 16 in my first year in college, and gave it up because it was just, I was growing too fast. It became dated by the time I was in my second year. So that I didn't start writing professionally until I was in this country.
When you began writing fiction, did you write within the framework of what you call romantic realism, the grandeur of man, what man could be?
Always.
Were you influenced at all by the Russian Revolution in this respect and living in a Soviet society?
Not at all. Perhaps it might have helped me in the ideas I held long before, in realizing how evil the opposite of individualism
collectivism
really is. Yes. In grasping how bad collectivism is in concrete practice. That might have been a value, but it's a horrible kind of experience. And I would rather have arrived at the positive without encountering that negative, but I can proudly say it didn't affect me, it didn't change anything in my way of thinking, the kind of development I can now look back upon. I went to a Soviet university, which of course, apart from, there were still at that time some good professors who were actually teaching subjects, but there was also a great deal of propaganda, and it did not affect me in the least. For that, I'm very grateful to myself.
You came to America when you were about 20 or 21 years old.
That's right.
And you went to Hollywood. Was this because of your interest in screenwriting?
Yes, but not ultimately. I could barely speak English. I certainly couldn't write it. And it was, at that time, the day of the silent movies. So I had figured out that I could be able to write a scenario, but not yet dialogue. That's why I decided I would start with the screen. But my first ambition always was novels.
You did earn your living in the early years in Hollywood in a variety of ways, I suppose.
Oh, I had a bad struggle, yes. I had to hold odd jobs, and I even wait on tables. And the first day I tried it, I was fired right there. But the last job of that kind, I was there a whole week, so that I was learning. But it was the years of the Depression, you know, and it was very difficult. I held all kinds of jobs which were very, very boring, but I was able to write.
Was that good for one's character, to have to suffer that way, to work as hard as you worked?
No, I don't think so. I think the only good is later. It gives you a certain self-confidence if you can overcome it and rise above it. But as such, I don't think hardships are good for anyone.
Our research indicated that you worked without pay for an architect, out of which you first began to write The Fountainhead, which of course deals with an architect. Is that the reason that you worked for the architect?
As research for The Fountainhead, oh yes. And I had asked him for the job for that reason. And he knew it was for a novel, but no one else in the office knew it.
This was not the first novel. This was the third novel by that time, was it not?
Yes, my first novel was With a Living. An Anthem was a novelette. And The Fountainhead came
Did you have difficulty getting your novels published? I've read that you had some difficulty with publishers who didn't accept them readily.
The Fountainhead, I had bad difficulties with, yes. 12 publishers rejected it on the grounds that it was too intellectual and non-commercial and wouldn't sell. And of course it's one of the great examples of a book made strictly by word of mouth. It was the readers that made this book, and it's still going on as strong as ever.
As strong as ever?
Yes.
How many years after publication?
It's now, it was published in 1943, so it's over 25 years.
Yes.
Can you calculate?
30 years.
Almost 30,
yes,
that's right.
30 years. Oh, do you understand why?
31,
yes,
actually.
That's right. Do you understand why this is so with readers?
Oh, yes. Because I was presenting them with a philosophy which is desperately needed today and which doesn't exist anywhere else, because it was an absolute desert in literature, both literarily, both in regard to romantic realism. There were no such novels. Practically everything that was serious was naturalism in those years, and more importantly, it's the philosophy of individualism.
Why do you object to, or why do you not like novels which are close to life as it really is, naturalism?
Because I don't think it's art.
It's not art.
It's partly art. In other words, a naturalistic novel is an incomplete work of art. It has certain elements of art, such as characterization, or some of them have a good style. All that is artistic. But art primarily, and that I can prove philosophically, is a recreation of reality, not a photograph. Art is not journalism. It is a recreation of reality according to an author's metaphysical value judgments. Metaphysical
Does that mean that
meaning.
you write only about what ought to be, not what is?
Yes, but let me finish. I use the big word, so I want to be sure that the audience does understand me. By metaphysical, I mean the nature of reality as such, the nature of existence. It's his view of man and of the nature of existence that a writer or any artist really expresses in art. And romantic art presents to man what he might be and ought to be. That is, it presents an ideal and tells man this is the essential nature of man, and you as a human being can become that if you wish. So that art in that sense, romantic art, is model building. Not, however, and I emphasize that, not for the purpose of improving or teaching your something to your readers.
Not teaching.
Oh, not teaching. Art should never be didactic. That's a secondary issue. That's pure gravy. The primary purpose of art is contemplation for its own sake. So that the purpose here is for the reader to see what greatness man is capable of and to be inspired by that.
So as I read Atlas Shrugged, then, and any one of the heroic characters, Hank Rearden or John Galt or Francisco, these give me a model of the kind of person I might be?
If you wish, but that isn't my purpose in writing it.
I see.
My purpose is for you to look at those people and to enjoy the spectacle. As a secondary consequence, you might find yourself inspired. Yes. That's fine. But I want to give you that experience. And that's what I want to give myself. I write for the purpose of creating an ideal man in actions which you can respect and admire, and which you don't find too often in life.
And you said, yes, that ideal man would be productive, and that to be productive is, most favorable environment is a laissez-faire capitalism without restraint upon him.
Of course.
So that you would oppose Antitrust laws, income tax, all the restraints that are normally imposed?
Oh, yes, certainly. Not normally. They're imposed abnormally.
Abnormally, I see.
But, yes, I would oppose all that. I believe in complete, laissez-faire, full, unregulated capitalism. Not mixed economy. What you have today is certainly not capitalism. But you have to leave man free to function.
From what you say about art, I would judge you do not regard photography as art, since it records precisely what is there. How do you feel about abstract art?
Do you mean non-objective?
Non-objective.
I think it's less art than photography. I think it is an enormous fraud.
Fraud?
Yes. I don't think there's... it's impossible to discuss it seriously. It means nothing. It is nothing. The perpetrators claim that they don't know what they're doing, and I think they're right. I'm willing to take them at their word. They don't know what they're doing, and neither do we, and the ash can is the proper place for it. But I mean it seriously.
Yes, I know you mean it seriously. I suspect many of those who've read your novels will wonder if you plan to write any more novels.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm under contract to write one, but I can't promise you when I will have it done.
How many years did it take you to write Atlas Shrugged, which is an enormous volume?
13 years. But my next novel won't be that long.
It won't?
Oh, no. Atlas is just once in a lifetime.
I should think so. I want to return for just one moment to religion and to the ethic in which so many of us were raised. Of course, religion is used by some people as a way of facing the idea of the inevitability of death. How do you feel about that as an objectivist? That is, how do you feel about death? Is it...
It doesn't concern me in the least, because I won't be here to know it. Don't you see that death, the worst thing about death, and what I regard as the worst human tragedy, is to lose someone you love. That is terribly hard. But your own death, if you're finished, you're finished. My purpose is not to worry about death, but to live life here on earth and now.
Do you find joy in that life?
Oh, yes. Very much so.
What are the sources of joy? Achievement?
Achievement. And romantic love, my husband. Those are the two great values in life. Career and romantic love.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.